Let me begin by echoing Mike's comments off the top and thanking Grace and Alexander and their robust team for pulling this off. They already had completely full agendas before they took this on, I have no doubt. So would you just join me in thanking the students who have pulled this off tonight? I'm grateful to you for being here. I'm grateful for the invitation. I'm grateful to my own partners in the enterprise, the 1,000 or so students I've taught in the last 10 years. I'm particularly grateful to 30 or so who coached me up earlier this week. Some former students got in on that act too, from Boston to New York, from Oxford to Amsterdam. These young women and men have allowed someone who's from where I'm from and who looks like I look and who even sounds like I sound to teach what I teach. And what I teach principally is how our legal system and how our death penalty regime in particular affects people who are less privileged than I am. And speaking generally, less privileged than we are at a place like William and Mary. You heard from Sydney, you heard from Kareem, so you won't be surprised when I tell you that every day these students remind me why ours is work worth doing. You are horizon lifting. I think a lot about courtrooms and about classrooms. Both are crossroads, sites where lives change direction. And both are competitive environments where people are told precisely what to look for, but too often fail to listen with a keen enough ear, and often to our peril. With the rare exception of things that happen at Wawa after midnight on the weekend, our very own OK Corral, as I call it, the experience of college students and participants in the criminal justice system brook little comparison. I am not here to analogize those two things. I want to be very clear about that at the front. But I would like to discuss a common calling that they both ask of us. And this came to mind in response, as most of my worthwhile thoughts do, to a student's question. Caroline is a student in my first year seminar. It was her birthday 2 weeks ago yesterday. Did we sing? Of course we sang. And then she looked at me in a very direct and disarming way and said, "What advice do you have for one newly 19? If you're in my line of work, you need to have an answer for this question." 3 things came to mind. The first was, you might think about getting your nose pierced without telling your parents, if your parents are the kind of parents who would drive 7 states to wish you a happy birthday. Caroline's parents were already on the road, so the expiration date on that advice had passed. My folks are here tonight, incidentally, so Caroline may be able to get me back for that. Hi, Mom. The second thing that came to mind was that I hope Caroline will take the kind of listening that we're trying to develop in our class, listening across lines of difference, listening for the unexpected detail, listening for the hidden truth. I hope she will take all of those things into court when she's called to serve on a jury at 29 or 39 or 49. My classes are built on stories too long unheard, stories that went sideways when the right person in power simply wasn't listening. No one seems to have listened to Henry Lee McCollum for 30 years. Until the 2nd of September 2014, when he was exonerated from North Carolina's death row after serving 11,000 days for a crime in which he had no part whatever. The judge who authorized Mr. McCollum's release happens to share my family name. He is Douglas B. Sasser. When I learned this, I did exactly what you would do if you were teaching a death penalty seminar. I started calling everybody involved in McCollum's case, and when their assistant picked up, I just said, "Tell him Sasser's on the phone." They took my calls. I wish you could all have the experience of speaking to a capital defense attorney 24 hours after her client has been exonerated. I really wish that we would stop pretending that we can meaningfully distinguish between who deserves to live and who deserves to die, but that's another talk. McCollum's attorney told me that he and his half-brother were intellectually disabled teenagers pressured into signing false confessions, that the police failed to test crime scene evidence and failed to share with the defense the evidence that they did test, that the prosecution overlooked a nearly identical murder committed a month after McCollum's arrest, and that when DNA evidence proved that another man had committed the murder, the prosecutor disclaimed it and opposed McCollum's release. These prosecutors were looking for a win, which to them meant a conviction. They were not listening. But even McCollum's own attorneys failed to hear his denials. One met with him in prison 10 times. Let us underscore this. His own attorney met with him in prison 10 times and begged him to plead guilty. We have got to do a better job hearing the accused, disproportionately people of color, and in capital cases, people who suffer from poverty, abuse of all kinds, addiction, mental health conditions, treated and untreated, and discrimination from individuals and institutions alike. And our deafness is systemic. Every day, courts make evidentiary determinations, literally deciding what in a defendant's story will be worth hearing and what will be outside the aperture of their case. Virginia gives us an example of this from just recent weeks. Mark Lawler, one of the 3 men on Virginia's death row, had his 2011 sentencing overturned by the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. Those judges found that Lawler's sentencing had excluded key expert testimony that the Constitution permits. And if I may share just one more example of our failure to listen, it happens every day in courts around the Commonwealth. Virginia law suspends the driver's licenses of those convicted of even the most picayune crimes. These women and men, who often work hourly jobs unlikely to excuse absences when transportation fails, also incur hefty fines and fees. And when they fall behind, and how could they not fall behind? Their licenses are apt to be suspended all over again. So I hope Caroline listens for these half stories. I hope she wants to find the fuller truth. But our alumni have potent examples of how she can do more. 2 of our alums are clerking for the federal district judge who will very soon determine if Virginia's license suspension regime is constitutional. Another will lead Mr. Lawler's defense in his resentencing in weeks to come. And a third, next month, will begin her work at the Center for Death Penalty Litigation, the group that walked Henry Lee McCollum out of court as a free man. All of these alums know that James Baldwin had it right. If you truly want to know how a country administers justice, you go not to the police, not to the lawyers, not to the judges, not to the protected members of the middle class. You go to the unprotected, those precisely who need the law's protection most, and you listen to their testimony. My students and I try to listen our way out of our own experience. But that experience itself, our classrooms and our colleagues to our left and to our right, also cry out for careful, compassionate listening. And that's the third thing that I thought of when Caroline asked me for advice. I'm not sure if you've noticed this or not, but our classrooms can become competitive environments. The admissions gauntlet that you ran and the gauntlet that my friends and I throw down before you 2 or 3 times a week asks you to distinguish yourself at every turn. Better, faster, stronger, as my track coach used to say, a little more colorfully. And hand out the whistles, I guess, because Gallup yesterday released a poll that said that 1 in 4 college students considers their instructor someone who cares about them as a person. At least that many of us have gotten a blue book with a note including this, which I did some years ago: "Page left blank for my tears." I chose to take that as a joke. I hope sincerely that it was. Our zero-sum, offer-no-quarter approach to education, to life, has real consequences. We feel burdened by wrong things. We feel burdened by ephemeral things, things that matter not in the fullness of time. I make a big ask of every class I teach. I ask them to swim against this powerful current, to look not only up but around, to not throw away your shot, sure, but also to remember that we're here for a good time, not a long time. You sound surprised at that, no? The world's major religions are with me on this. They tell us to put somebody else first, as CJ and I say to our children, and also to let compassion guide our steps. Compassion, literally, to suffer with. And we all suffer. We are all crooked timber. Or, as I hear you say to one another a dozen times a day, same. But here's the tea. I got to be honest, I learned that earlier this week, but I'm still going in. The tea is this. I'm almost done, but I'll work it in more. The tea is that even more even though we're more alike than unalike, even though what's most personal truly is what's most universal, we can't know what one another is going through at any given moment, whether our trivial is someone else's serious, or whether our serious is someone else's bona fide trauma. I can't know, I may never really know, what my former student was feeling when 3 years after our class, and 3 days before his senior year, he took his own life. But Peter's the reason I'm here tonight. And Peter's who I think of every time I tell my students I'm thinking of them. And I invite them, I implore them to think of one another. So I hope you will. I hope you'll look out for each other. I hope you'll listen to each other. I hope you won't be afraid to go there, to say when you're hurting, and to lock arms with someone who is. To bear, as the scriptures suggest, each other's burdens, just like my students did earlier this week. One of my very best was having a tough go, and she had the courage to put a name to it. She left the room. 2 beats later, another student said, "I'm going with her." I've never been prouder in a classroom. Because there are so many more important things than this midterm. Thank you.